Hey folks, Nick here from another BookTube channel, continuing the Swamp Thing read-along with Swamp Thing number 47. The Crisis on Infinite Earths is underway, and John Constantine has recruited Swamp Thing to deal with the spiritual fallout of this crisis, while the heroes are engaged in big, epic, punchy battles. There is a threat by a South American basically witch cult where they are planning to launch a spiritual attack on heaven. They're going to try to destroy heaven. And so it's Swamp Thing's responsibility to stop that. But before that, he is taking a detour to visit the Parliament of Trees. That's what Constantine told him. That's where he's going to finally get some answers about what he is, his existence, his purpose, and things like that. So follow along. We'll see how this goes. If you want the full context of everything I just described, go back, watch the previous episodes in this series so that you're completely caught up. Cover by Stephen Bissett and John Toddleben, which gives us a preview of Swamp Thing meeting a bunch of other tree-like creatures, tree-like monsters. But Bissett and Toddleben aren't doing the interiors. That's Stan Woch and Ron Randall. And we open up with this kind of weaselly little guy. He's a photographer talking about these photographs he took in a swamp in Louisiana. He was a nature photographer trying to get some pictures of some birds, but instead he stumbled upon Abby, who was taking a little dip in the swamp, which she did with no shirt on. This little weasel says, I obviously I would have, told her that I was there, but I didn't want to ruin the spontaneity of the moment. So, I took all these pictures and just, never announced myself and my presence. Real scuzzball. But I like the framing of this being developing film, clipped onto this clothesline here that continues onto the next page as well. And while this pervert talks about snapping multiple nude pictures of Abby, he sees Swamp Thing approach her. And not only that, he sees them kissing. Because before Swamp Thing deals with the crisis and before Swamp Thing goes to visit the Parliament of Trees, he's got to say goodbye temporarily to Abby. Because, honestly, who knows how this is really going to turn out. You got to go and spend at least one more day with the love of your life. We get our splash title page here, The Parliament of Trees, written by Alan Moore, art by Stan Woch and Ron Randall. And here, Swamp Thing and Abby are just kind of restating what I told you about how, they don't trust John, but he's promised to give him answers, so he's going to go to the River Tefe to meet him, which is where he's going to get all of these answers that he's been promised. And meanwhile, we get the glimpse of where that photographer is, and this little weasel keeps going on about how he's never witnessed anything so disgusting in his life. He was so shocked he almost forgot to reload his camera. Keyword almost. So he kept snapping pictures. And he caught a lot more just by sticking around. We get him refilling his camera. And Swamp Thing and Abby go up onto the embankment, and there's a quick little dialogue here where Swamp Thing mentions that going to this river with Constantine is going to be worth it to unlock the secrets and mysteries that he keeps speaking about, and that recalls something in Abby's memory. She says, "It's something you just said. I suddenly almost remembered this dream I had a while back. Nah, it's gone. Forget it." And that's a reference to Swamp Thing number 33, which was the reprint issue where Abby has a dream and she meets Cain and Abel from the Houses of Secrets and Mysteries, and Abel shows her the events of House of Secrets 92, which was Swamp Thing's first appearance. So she sees the story of Alex Olsen and Linda Olsen and how Alex became the Swamp Thing in that story. Really, what's happening now is, we got hints of what's going on with Swamp Thing's uh, origins way back then, but Swamp Thing doesn't know that, and Abby only learned it in a dream, so she couldn't remember it. So it's finally going to come to light, and we get here the most obscene panel that we've gotten yet in this Swamp Thing run. Of all the things that have been drawn, this might be easily, I think, to me, the most obscene. Because look, they're saying goodbye to each other. He's about to go on a big business trip, and what do you do before that? You take some time alone together, and this is, I mean, there's no way around it. This is Abby performing oral sex on Swamp Thing. She's kneeling topless before him. She's got her head in his lap. She's got a part of his body in her mouth. It's leaking juices. He's got his hand on the back of her head, pushing her down. And the worst part of all of this, the most disgusting part of all of this, is Swamp Thing is looking right at the camera and smirking about it. This is filthy. This is absolute filth. This comic should not have been allowed. I finally am in agreement with all the angry parents. Where's the Comics Code Authority when you need it? But this is hysterical to me. But really fun, good stuff. And our little weasel photographer is trying to sell these photos. He's been talking to a newspaper this whole time, saying, I'm giving you the first scoop at this. What do you say? Do you want them or not? But we're done with that section for a little while. Swamp Thing is ready to depart to Brazil to meet John. We get a nice little regrowth sequence. I always love these regrowth sequences. And we get a very different looking Swamp Thing. And I love this idea because he's now in a different part of the world with different vegetation. And so he looks different when he grows. When he uses that vegetation, he now is kind of matching what's around him. So I love that idea. John is already there, and he's been having trouble with the locals who've been staring at him, not trusting him. But once Swamp Thing shows up, they become reverent. They're bending the knee, holding their spears up to him. And John explains, this is not the first time they've seen something like you, something of your sort. You're not the first swamp elemental by a long shot. Over the centuries, circumstances have conspired to make others like you when the need arose. And that is directly something that is spoken by Abel, I believe, in that House of Secret, that Swamp Thing 33 issue. So we're getting that fleshed out now. Swamp Thing's finally learning this secret. They walk through the forest, and at a certain point, John is no longer allowed to continue on. No humans are allowed beyond this point. Swamp Thing must go alone to meet the Parliament of Trees. And we get a wonderful spread page here where Swamp Thing enters the clearing, and we've got a lot of different trees that are very obviously containing like faces. They're doing their own kind of sun salutation, holding their arms up to the sky. And it's a beautiful spread. Love this page. And Swamp Thing starts feeling, he starts getting a really good feeling from this ground. He feels like he's returned home in a way. Like there's a great sense of peace here. He can like sense when the wildlife will like make noise before they even make it. At any moment now, a parrot will scream. And I'll read out his narration starting from here. I won't do the whole thing. Only the giants, huge and mute, continue to disturb me. Is this how they have chosen to spend eternity? Motionless, unspeaking, rainwater pooling in the sockets of their eyes. I was told that I would find answers here. I've found marvels. I've found a garden of enigma and a graveyard of legends. No answers. And then there's a response to his thought from this tree here. No questions. And Swamp Thing is surprised because he hasn't been speaking out loud. He's been thinking these things. But this tree has heard him. And when he asks, how did you hear me? The response is, flesh speaks, wood listens. You have approached the Parliament. Your ancestors welcome you. And we get now finally into the nitty gritty. Swamp Thing says, I'm not, one of you, I was my creation was an accident. I borrowed my consciousness from another man who, there was a terrible explosion. I'm not like you. And then it's explained, you are exactly like me. I was Alex Olson. So we're getting here the revisiting the original Swamp Thing from House of Secrets 92. And he talks about how he was a scientist, 1905, doing an experiment in the swamp. It killed him and his beloved Linda. Swamp Thing says, Linda, but that's my story. I was Alec Holland. My wife was Linda. And Alex goes on, coincidence is the pattern of the world's bark. The stories of all that are rooted here have their similarities. So, and then, we get an introduction to another previous Swamp Thing whose name was Albert Hollerer. So the names are all kind of similar sounding. They all have like lost loves. They all have something in common. So the universe is kind of choosing these people with these similarities to take up the mantle of the swamp elemental. And it's explained to Alec that they all had their ending here. They chose to come here, when there was nothing else to do, nothing left to do, and just become rooted. And like this is their retirement home essentially. And then he explains that you have inherited our green mantle, so you will eventually come here to rest as well. But he says, I can't do that just yet. There is a crisis going on. I have to deal with it. And Alex Olson tells him, you are an Earl King, E-R-L King. So knowledge is your birthright. Please address the Parliament. Sit here at my roots and let your roots intertwine with ours. Let your mind intertwine with our mind. So Swamp Thing is connecting his consciousness into their consciousness. And he's kind of going on his own rite of spring here, where he's getting the complete history of swamp elementals and how they came to be and what they can do. We get a little Man-Thing cameo down here from Marvel. And he starts to feel like all these possibilities that he wasn't realizing before because he was too limited in his thinking. He was thinking too human. And I'll read what the conclusions he comes to here. The ability to regrow, to travel effortlessly in the green, this seemed marvelous to me, but there is so much more, so much that I had not imagined. I have restricted myself to one size, to one shape. I have never attempted to animate dead or carven wood with my consciousness, never thought to manipulate insects with my sense and juices. So many possibilities, each fascinating hint, each dazzling new concept leads me deeper into the unmappable continent of their mind. Something about multiple body control, something about time travel. And as he's plunging further and further into their minds to get these answers, the Parliament finally addresses him. And we get him kind of free-floating here with their heads looking in. And he's asking for help, saying, I need to address this crisis that's coming up. What do I do? I've traveled this country. I've seen, evil, unbelievable evil that preys on my mind. I wonder if nature is just to allow such things. They respond, flesh doubts, wood knows. And they explain how, it's something that's been explained, I think, in previous issues, where aphid eats leaf, ladybug eats aphid, soil absorbs dead ladybug, plant feeds upon the soil. Are any of these things evil? And it concludes with, where is evil in all the wood? And that line is going to kind of stick around and become what Swamp Thing really takes away from this. But before I turn the page, he does also ask how to use his power to his advantage in this crisis. And they respond, power is not the thing. To be calm within oneself, that is the way of wood. Power tempts anger, and anger is like wildfire. Avoid it. And this isn't enough for Swamp Thing. He keeps trying to ask questions, but they say this audience is concluded. We've told you everything you need to know. But he still has so many questions. But he's kicked out of the consciousness. He's cast out from the hive mind. And he leaves. He leaves the Parliament of Trees. And Alex tells him, go now, for this is not your resting place. Not yet. One day, it will be. Swamp Thing returns to John, and he tells him, they said I must avoid power, beware of anger. They asked me, where is evil in all the wood? John's frustrated by that. Is that all? Bloody hell, I've read better horoscopes in the Daily Mirror. Wood elementals. They've all got dry rot, all of them. So he says, you know where we're going to find evil? We're going to find it in Chilo, which is where the Brujeria are performing their rituals, which is going to lead to the death of heaven. And as they're walking out, Swamp Thing shoulders slumped. He's slumped. He is dejected. John asks him why, and he says, they did not want me, Constantine. They were creatures like me, and they cast me out. And we get a little iris of him walking away, slouched. Kind of calls back the imagery from House of Secrets 92, that final panel of Swamp Thing walking away after Linda rejects him. So I think that's a callback there. We cut back to our story framing device of the photographer who has been now ushered out of the newspaper office, and the newspaper men are talking about these photos. Should they run them? Should they not? And they say, nah, this is obviously fake. Look, this guy, it's not a real swamp monster. You can see the zipper on the outfit. But one of them picks it up and says, I recognize this woman. She works at Elysium Lawns, which is where my daughter, that's where we keep her. That's her home. So if this is what the staff who are watching children do in their spare time, that people have a right to know, I say we print it and be damned. He slams down the pictures of Swamp Thing and Abby in a very intimate pose. And that is it. Next up, a murder of crows. So how will the nude photo leak affect the relationship of Swamp Thing and Abby? I think we're going to have to wait a few issues to see that while we deal with some Crisis on Infinite Earth stuff. But I really like this issue. I think there's a lot of great drawing in it from Woch and Randall. I think the story is really solid. I think we're finally getting all these answers coming together about the history of Swamp Thing. So I think this is a really solid one. Let me know your thoughts about it in the comments below. Thank you for spending some time with me today, but now it's time to get back to reading.